Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller. We are back here with you for our new podcasts for the new year. We are here today, previous to the new year. This is something that we wanted to do, and we are here with a very special guest to our campus, Mr. Tory Gates. Tory, welcome to the campus, and thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
But, of course, and two veterans that Nightly News podcast fans will remember, instruction and reference librarian Samantha Bice. Samantha, welcome back.
Hi, thanks.
And of course, since as an aside, this is the first time that you've been married since you've been on the show.
Oh yeah.
So we certainly congratulate you on your nuptials, and certainly hope everything's going well.
Oh, it is.
And you got a wonderful man. I'm jealous. And
so
of course, podcast veterans will know Dylan Epler is the one on the other side of that. So, of course, Dylan's been on the podcast several times as well. We hope to have him back in the future. So
yeah, he would love that.
We'll have to ask him. All right. And of course, Nightly News President Brian Cristiano. Brian, thank you very much for coming back. You are now a veteran of all things media in the Harrisburg area. Just finished up an internship with PCN. Of course, doing great things with iHeartRadio in the Harrisburg area. You're just all over the place. So I guess if nothing else, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us.
Thank you again for having me, Professor, as always.
Well, Tory is a local author here from the Harrisburg area. Just a little bit more about him. A broadcaster for more than 30 years, Tory has seen and done just about everything in the radio business. Currently, he can be found hosting, producing, and jobbing about the mid-state of Pennsylvania. Also hosting a program for authors on the Book Speak Network, and is known as DJ Rift, the host of the Music Club for the London-based radio airwave station. Why he's here today is he's recently published Searching for Roy Buchanan, available on Brown Posey Press. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that today, and really just kind of talking about maybe the publishing process. We have a lot of aspiring authors here on campus that would love to know more about that process. So let's start. Before we will certainly get to the book, I want to spend plenty of time on the book, but you are and have a variety of jobs, from sound tech to a morning anchor with WITF to even a sports anchor. How did you get, usually in the broadcasting industry, you're kind of one or the other. How did you come up with this jack of all trades mentality?
Well, it was really kind of a necessity because the old saying, you wear a lot of hats, is something that has just happened in radio. And I mean, it's been getting close to 35 years in this business, and you just find that you go where the jobs are, and then you find that you think you're good at something. Well, then you have to turn your hands or your voice to something else. And I've done just about everything there is to do in this business that I've wanted to do. I've done just about every music format there is. And it's just the fact that I really wanted to do it. And it's sort of like when I was in college. I mean, I went through my high school years as a, very depressed, very angsty, and completely undisciplined person. And that's got to do a little bit of my life, but it's not like anyone to blame. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to college. I didn't even think I was going to make it. Today, my grades would not get me into a college. That's how bad they were. And I just knew that writing and creating stories and doing things like that was something that I did enjoy doing, but I didn't know how to put it together. And I was very lucky. I grew up in Vermont, and I got a chance to go to a small college in Maine. St. Joseph's College of Maine is the name of it now. And at the time, it was only about 500 students. It had a very small communications program. It only had 35 students in the freshman class. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew that they had a small radio station. I'd always been interested in radio, but I didn't think I could ever do it. And then I got there and found out they were getting permission for an FM signal, which sounded unheard of, and it was going to have about 360 watts. And we were about 20 miles outside the city of Portland. And our instructor said, well, when we get this thing up and we get permission and we flip it on, we're going to hit the Portland market. We're going to have potential of 100,000 listeners. And in the back of my mind, I just thought, that sounds interesting. And I thought, okay, let's see what happens. And I was very lucky. We were allowed to get our hands on the studio equipment. We were allowed to mess with things. We were allowed to, well, not necessarily break things, but they wanted us to experiment, have some fun, because we only had a few senior students. We only had a few people who had been on the AM station and knew what we were getting into. So a lot of us kids got the chance, and I got very lucky from that point on. I mean, I only did a few shows because we were only on for the last month of my freshman year. It took that long to get approval and get it running. And then I had to go home for the summer. And the day after I got home, I landed a part-time job at a station in Burlington, Vermont, WDOT. And that was, again, luck. I walked into a station that needed someone desperately, and I had the world's shortest job interview. I got pushed by a salesperson into the on-air studio where the program director, a guy named Kevin Greenan, was on the air. I had barely enough time to introduce myself. And he said, "You want a job?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You got it."
You got to love that. That's a wonderful interview.
Well, it was, that's how it was. And it was just learning to make a mess from there. So I was a board op, and I was just basically a guy that would do anything that they needed to do. I went back to school, took some of that experience with me. I landed a couple of other jobs while I was still in college. So I spent more time at radio stations in the middle of the night than being on campus doing what most of us wanted to be doing. And I never got tired of it. And I was a radio geek, and I admit it. And I had a lot of fun. And I just realized it was something I wanted to do. And so that's really been the first love of my life throughout my career. So I went where the jobs were. I've been fortunate. I mean, I was in the Boston market for about 10 years, but I am not someone anyone would have known. I was one of the jobbers. I was one of the guys that never got full-time. I just bounced around to this station, that station. I'd work for 3 or 4 stations at once. I'd be producing sports over here. I might be doing news over here. I might be doing some music over here, whatever. And I might be managing the station for a little bit, and that's what you do. And it was just part of that was a journey for me to see what I could do and to see what kind of challenges I could handle. And I just loved every damn minute of it. I couldn't help it.
You know, what really kind of, when you're telling me about your experience in college radio, I really went through the same things, and I just absolutely loved it. The problem was, when I was graduating from school, and I graduated my undergrad in 2003, that was really when basically everything was being run by computers. So, for example, with your experience, you had the opportunity to maybe work some overnights. I never had that opportunity. And so many opportunities were just taken away from people to get the love of the broadcasting industry.
The human element was going away even before that.
Sure.
And because in the early 80s, deregulation started to strip away some of the needs. And a lot of it ended up being like a business decision. A lot of it was this kind of, we can save some money here by doing this. We can save some money by doing that. Oh, we don't need a receptionist anymore. We don't need this or that kind of thing. And what it does is, and we're seeing it today, I think Brian can attest to it. Brian and I work, and he's the reason I'm here. Thank you, Brian. We're losing the fun of what is really going on. The computers, automation are useful, yes. They can help a lot. They do make our jobs easier to some extent, but we lose the human element where it is lonely, but it's also, and it's a little weird, but being alone in the middle of the night on the air and knowing, or at least reminding yourself somebody is listening to what you're doing, so stay focused on it and don't lose the plot. Yeah, there's a few places that still have that kind of thing going. I'm afraid for the business in the long term that we're going to get to a point where we don't have enough people who know how to put their hands on things, that we don't have enough people that can step in when the automation falls apart, when the sacred Wi-Fi goes down, because when it becomes something that doesn't work, if we're in a situation, people are still going to turn to radio, and there needs to be somebody or something there that knows what they are doing. And I think it's going to change back. It's almost kind of going to go retro, I think, in the coming years, where we're going to need that. And those of us that are still in the business and the young folks that are coming in that have expressed interest in being, like, just doing even something like this, it's going to be, that time's going to come again. And I just hope it isn't like a dire emergency or a disaster where we have to become important again. But we all are still.
With automation, I think one of the good things that's come out of it is that podcasting has really taken off. I mean, one of the greatest things for us personally with the Nightly News is, we were never going to be able to afford a license to broadcast FM. So while the equipment that we have here is not the cheapest thing in the world, it's certainly much more affordable than, going the license route. So at a minimum, I guess it does open some opportunities and maybe some self-taught people. But unfortunately, again, to your point, I just don't think there's enough broadcast knowledge out there. And that's why I'm glad to have someone like Brian. Brian, what are your thoughts here? Again, I do want to move on to the book because that's why we're here. But what are your thoughts when you talk about and see your experiences in radio? Do you ever worry, because you want your career to be in radio, do you ever worry, to Tory's point, that maybe it's going down a dark road?
Well, yeah, Tory also brought up a very valid point, very similar to what Glenn Hamilton said, that eventually down the road they think it's going to come back up. And again, we talked about this nonstop, myself, Tory, and the other people. Right now, it's not the same, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I think eventually the younger generation will pick up with listening to FM, AM. I even do believe AM will pick up again with the younger generation.
Well, and AM kind of has seen a mini renaissance with sports radio.
Yes.
So I will say that is still a growing segment of radio.
Yeah, 1460, the one that Tory and I work for, it really does very well. I mean, with Tory's a big part of the Hershey Bears, and Bishop McDevitt football is a big one for us. So again, those ratings always come out pretty solid.
And there's a lot of things that are still being put forward. I also work in the Lebanon Valley for. There's an AM/FM combo, WQIC FM, WLBR AM. LBR is like a throwback station. The morning show, which I do on occasion, with all of the news, traffic, sports, weather, and stuff that we do, and the occasional music, it sounds like the show that I grew up listening to in Vermont as a kid. And it's got a strange old charm to it. And I mean, a lot of the AM signal is talk radio and stuff, which I could go on about and say some things that I probably get in trouble for. But
we'll have you back.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But there's still a real value to it when you realize that advertisers are still paying to get their ads on it. That we do high school sports up there a lot. We do some college sports. We do Penn State stuff. We do a lot of different things. And there's still a local thing that you don't see enough of any longer. And again, like Brian was saying, yes, I think we all agree it's going to come back in time, and it's going to come back around. It always swings around. It always kind of goes in a circle. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to see and be ready for it. And it would be great to just bring some younger generation in and see how much fun we've been having.
I'm sorry to cut you off before we go. One thing that's really becoming popular, and I've learned, is so right now in Allentown, they just had a transition where they flipped the station. It's now a podcast radio station. And so far the book was really solid with it. So that's something I could see happening more often in maybe Harrisburg.
Like ESPN Radio is doing something like that during their overnights instead of doing like nationally syndicated stuff, because they're putting out, every single ESPN personality has a podcast. So they're putting their podcasts on overnights.
And the thing is, people want more local stuff. I mean, that's a lot of problems with syndications. They want the local people instead of someone who is from, let's say, New York or Tennessee or wherever.
Yeah, and there's another thing too. One of the values of low power FMs, community radio, that kind of thing, is you get people in that maybe they don't have the experience, maybe they don't have the voice training, but they're having fun with it. One of our blood enemies in Maine back in the day was the University of Southern Maine's radio station in Portland. USM had a station called WMPG, and they were our competitor in terms of listenership. Well, they are a fully community-run station. Every couple of hours, it's a different show. It's a different host. I've got friends who work there, and it is one of the coolest, hippest places, because you go into this weird little house, and there's wall-to-wall CDs and records, and just the history of that station is all over the walls, and they run almost completely on the community and on donations. They do get some help, I think, from the school. They have a couple of employees, but it is one of those things. I was a guest on a couple of the shows when I go up to visit my family up there, and It is so much fun, and they have enough power, and they have enough of a name, and they've been around long enough that that kind of thing is going to work too. It's going to work.
Well, I do want to move on to the book that just came out, Searching for Roy Buchanan, available on Brown Posey Press. So why you are here today is because Samantha and Brian brought you here today to talk a little bit more about the publishing process. Now, of course, Samantha, as we talked about on the previous podcast, has just self-published her own first book. So maybe just as a preface to some questions that we might have for Tory, can you tell us some of the process that you went through in the self-publishing realm?
Sure. So for the students listening, first you have to write something. So you can't publish until you write, because I know a lot of you out there are really interested in publishing. First, write something, and that might take a while. So I'm a poet. First thing I did was start writing. And I published whenever I was 28, like a year and a half ago. So I usually tell people when they ask how long it took, I tell them 28 years. Because it was a lot of experiences that I had in high school and college and even after. So I had a collection of poems. I chose the ones that I liked. I started going to festivals and reading them at open mics and being asked. I got paid a little bit of money, and that was cool to like make $50 for reading my poetry out loud. But otherwise, it wasn't making me money. It wasn't a job. It was something I did in my spare time. I tested my poetry out. The ones that people seemed to like or talk to me about, I put in the book. I designed the book, and then I printed the book with my own money, and then I sold the book. And then after that, I liked it so much that I actually started my own publishing organization, and I do that to raise money for organizations in the area that I volunteer with, and Dylan helped me with that, so we were co-editors, and that was a lot of fun. So self-publishing was a lot of fun. My next work, I'm going to go through a publisher, and that might take like a decade till I can get somebody to do it with me. So I'm hoping to learn a lot from Tory, because I'm not really sure what that process looks like. I could talk about self-publishing a lot, but I don't know how to actually get published with a publisher.
Well, my publisher may want to talk to you. That's one of the things I'm always on the lookout for. Now, publishing, this is the thing. I went through a lot of years of not really writing anything. I did not seriously write anything until the early 1990s, and I wrote a science fiction novel, and I had in my head mapped out what a series would be like and how different would it be to sort of set it apart from other science fiction. Well, basically too many things about it weren't really that good, and it was just a first attempt despite all of the rewrites, and it basically came out like Star Trek fan fiction, only with different names. It just wasn't that good. I even had, by sheer luck, a publisher in the mid-90s, a real deal publisher who works with a publishing house in New York, look at it, and she liked the idea, but she handed it off to one of her colleagues, and he eviscerated it. And with good reason. There was a lot of things wrong with it. It just wasn't the thing. And I just put it away, and I had other things going in my life and my career. It was not until 2007 that a few things came together, and I suddenly decided I was now going to try to write again, because I suddenly had ideas. Searching for Roy Buchanan first was written in 2007, and I had all of these strange little threads, and as someone Brian and I will know, Frank Schofield asked the question one time, "Give me the elevator pitch. What is it?" And this was all I had in 2007. I have a Japanese teenager with the ability to time travel, but doesn't know how to use it. And then I took my interest in Japanese culture of various sorts in history, and the title Searching for Roy Buchanan stuck as a title, and I didn't know why. Now, I'm a blues fan. I play guitar, I play music, but I'm not really a blues musician, but the blues is the root of pretty much all rock and roll, and it is the music that always got me first. Roy Buchanan was a brilliant guitarist, one of the people that the music world and the hardcore music fans knew, but a lot of people didn't know because he didn't really want the spotlight. And, he died very tragically, but I always thought there was something really intriguing in his story. So I took these threads and I just started putting them together. And over the years, this story evolved, and I wrote that book, and then I proceeded to write the sequel, and then 3 more in just rapid-fire succession over a period of about 2 years. The story, Aki is the main character. This is this girl. She's got 2 brothers. She has the ability to time travel, but she has no idea how to use it, and her family's just trying to survive anyway, and there's all this crazy stuff happening. And then I wrote this story, and then, well, we need to do more. what happens next? What happens next? And I bashed out all these things. I had an agent. This is another one of the great pitfalls. I did get an independent agent for about 4 years, and she tried to do an honest job. She tried to pitch the book to every publisher she could find. And she tried to package it. At the time, Harry Potter was huge. She tried to package it as sort of a Harry Potter-ish type of thing. Some elements, maybe, but not really. But I was like, fine, whatever you think will work. Well, in the meantime, I started writing other things because nothing was happening with it, and she finally just said, I can't do anything with this. And I said, okay, that's fine. And it's a good thing because the book wasn't ready. It was really thin and very limp, and I didn't like it, and my writing style had changed. So I continued to write other things along with sort of putting that one on the shelf. And then finally, around 2012, I had my girlfriend at the time and a very close friend of mine, Alice Pottiger, had looked at some of the things I'd read and written out, and she said, you can't sit and wait for a publisher. You can't just keep hunting for a publisher. You've got to set one of your kids free. And I took a book called Parasite Girls, which was a just contemporary novel, had 4 main characters, pretty reasonable story in terms of being able to follow it. And I thought, all right, let's do this. And I went through what used to be called CreateSpace on Amazon. Alice put me in touch with a fabulous artist named Mitch Bentley, who is moving now, but he's lived in Harrisburg for a long time. He did a killer cover for not much money, and we put it out that way. And so I sort of stumbled around by myself trying to promote this. And some of the things Samantha did were some of the things that I did. I was still playing in a band at the time that kind of been whittled down to basically myself and my bass player. And I had this idea. I started reading bits of Parasite Girls to Jen Shearer, my bass player. Well, she picked up my guitar, and I said, let me just read this, see what you think. She says, yeah, go ahead. So I just start reading. She's never even read the book. And she just listens for a minute, and then she just starts freestyling guitar under it. That's how great a musician she is. She can play anything. And she just started improvising this neoclassical guitar thing. And I'm like, do that. So we read and played some of this at our performances. And it went over well, but it wasn't really selling anything. And then I got another stroke of luck. I got a chance to go to the Midtown Scholar in Harrisburg and do a day where I got to sit at a table and do a book signing. And I sat next to a guy named Robert Walton. He wrote a book called Fatal Snow. He's written a couple of books. Really nice guy, very good author. He was on Sunbury Press Books, which is the parent company. And we had a talk. We spent like a lot of book signings, you just kind of sit there and you smile and you hope people pick up your book and actually maybe will take a chance on somebody they've never heard of. Well, a few people did, which was cool. But anyway, Robert and I talked. And he said, I think this book would really be cool. I think Lawrence Knorr, our publisher, might like this, and or whatever else you have. And I thought, okay, that's cool. So I sent an email off to Mr. Knorr and didn't hear anything for a few months. And then he got back to me and he said, yes, you're doing the right thing. You've self-published your first one. You're getting out there. Do that. That's a good first step. Now, if you have something new that you think is good, get it to me. So I kind of weighed a couple of things in 2016, and I had a book called A Moment in the Sun, which was a really it was a young adult novel, but it was a very kind of a dark novel, and it was about facing one's past before you face your future. And it was some of it was very personal to me, and some of it was really it was from part of a dark period of my life, but also from other people based on some things I read. Well, I gave it to a friend, and she said, this one. So sent it in, didn't hear anything for about 3, 4, 5 months. Finally, I get this email that says, we like this. We want to publish it. I thought this was a joke. I'm looking at the email going, this is a joke, right? Somebody's playing a joke on me. I couldn't believe it. And then my heart stopped when I realized, they want to do it. Wow. So it took a few months, and there was a lot of process, and there's a lot of process in terms of the legal things, the copyright. I had to do a mechanical license for lyrics to a song that was not my own. I had to do that myself. Mitch Bentley cranked out another fantastic cover, and long process, editing, going through an editor and thankfully I had an editor named Janice Rayam who understood my writing. I don't know how. And finally we got it done. And they've been very supportive. Sunbury Press Books has since spun off. Sunbury is mostly for the larger bulk of the publishing world that they have. Brown Posey Press is our fiction imprint. We have a horror suspense imprint called Hellbender Press. We have a children's one called Speckled Hen Press. We have like 5, 6 of them. And so I've been working with them. Mr. Knorr asked me to host a podcast on the Blog Talk Radio Network for Brown Posey, and it's not just for those on the label, it's for other indie authors, so we're giving others a voice. And
there you go, Samantha.
Yeah, there I go.
Well, and so it worked out. It's worked out. They've been very nice. They haven't given me any trouble about what I have written. They do sort of have some sway over, okay, which one of these are we going to do next? But I did that one. I did A Moment in the Sun in 2016. We did another novel called Live from the Cafe in 2017, which was my fun story about the strangest, most uncorporate coffee shop on earth and all the weird people who hang out there.
The Midtown Scholar?
Actually, it's a combination of all of the strange coffee places I've hung out in my life, from Starbucks to this hole in the wall that basically had a couple of coffee dispensers and a lot of loud music playing. And they're not around anymore, sadly. But it was an idea of, well, hey, if I ran a coffee shop, what would it be like? And so I made it the weirdest, strangest place. I picked a tiny little town in Quebec because I grew up near the Canadian border, infused Canadian music that I heard growing up as a kid, some of the TV that I saw coming in the pre-cable days down, and I had a story, and they liked it, so there was that. And then finally, Mr. Knorr said, okay, we're ready to set Roy Buchanan and the gang, we could set Aki and all of her friends free, and this is the first of a series. It took a long time to get that as good as it's ever going to be, and I remember how dire it was when I first wrote it. But a lot of people were really supportive. I had some very good teachers. I had friends who were willing to read it. I had friends who were willing to help me with the cultural aspects of Japan, what I wasn't getting right. And it's a good story. I feel really good about it, and I'm my own worst critic. So if I feel it's good, I think it's a compelling, fun story, and it might get you to think a little bit.
I want, in the last couple minutes we have here, because, Tory, we are here before your presentation, so I don't want you to be late for your own presentation. I do want to give Brian and Samantha a chance to ask you a question. So more rapid-fire question, maybe?
I mean, how do you? I mean, I see it firsthand how you're working in the studio. How is it like multitasking between writing your book and, let's say, board operating a Hershey Bears game? How difficult can that be?
That is how I did it. I actually wrote that between traffic reports. I worked at XM Radio for almost 5 years, and I mostly worked as a traffic reporter, and that in itself was incredibly hectic when you're doing traffic for 2 or 3 cities and having to watch a lot of things. But in broadcasting, you learn to multitask. You learn to watch things. You learn to keep an eye on several things at once. And I always have had the ability to do that. I've always had the ability to listen to music and read and have a television on. And one of my college roommates once said, I do not understand how you know everything that's going on. You just learn how to do it. And it's one of those things where you just let it come out of you and you just sort of get into a groove, and that groove doesn't stop. So that's how I do it.
There you go, Brian. Words from a very wise man.
Yes.
Samantha, we have about 1 minute left. Do you have any final questions for Tory?
I do, yeah. So your writing process, is there any spot that takes discipline for you? So like I'm somebody who I have to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning every day, and I have to be there at my desk working until I leave for work at 7:30, because I think that's when my muse shows up. Sometimes 5 minutes before I have to leave, but it eventually shows up, and then it pours out of me. Do you have any kind of discipline practices, or does it just kind of come to you in your spare moments throughout the day?
I think part of it is that I'm always working on something. I'm always thinking about something. The discipline part is it's basically 2 parts. You have the beginning process of getting your storyline together, getting your characters together, and knowing that the story is right and that it's ready to go. Then when it's ready to go, get started, get going, and don't stop. And until the draft is done. And what I do is, when I am in that process, each day I'm going to write one chapter, whatever it is, however long it is. If I keep going, that's a bonus, and I just don't stop till that draft is finished. And you kick yourself if you don't do that.
Well, that's going to bring us to the end of the Nightly News podcast. Tory, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for spending time with us. It's really unbelievably insightful to get your insight on not only broadcasting, which is a love of mine, but of course writing. I've never sat down to try to write a book, but I'm in my PhD program, and I'm pretty proud of a paper that I just turned in this week, so maybe you never know what might turn into a book at some time. Not only that, the information and mentorship, I suppose, in a way, that you're giving Brian, I'm sure he's going to remember for the rest of his life. So
yes,
we appreciate that. And thank you for visiting the campus today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Nightly News President Brian Christiana, for instruction and reference librarian and author Samantha Bice. And Samantha, really quick, where can you get your book?
Oh, I have a link. If you go to sambice.com, that's SAMBISE.com, you can get all my information there, and I have a link to my book there.
And Tory, any copies of Searching for Roy Buchanan down at the Scholar?
Not at this point. I'm working on them.
We have a copy at Central Penn College Library for checkout.
So you can stop into the library, or of course you can look Tory up on Facebook, at Tory Gates on Twitter, and I'll put your website along with this podcast article so you can go and order any of Tory's 4 books. And Tory, thank you so much for being here, and best of luck to you on your future books.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's going to be it for another episode of the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll see you again next time.
Hi, this is Brian Christiana, the president of the Nightly News Media Club. Thanks for listening.
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and we are back here for our new term. Always looking forward to everyone's favorite guest, Adrienne Thoman. Adrienne, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Always such a warm welcome.
And before we get started, please, I want to give a shout out to Adrienne's personal podcast venture, the Pirate Life Podcast. You can look it up on Facebook. Just got done recording a couple of those episodes, and I'll tell you what, that's always fun because we're in the studio here at 6:30 in the morning,
Oh,
so it's always interesting when we do those. But Adrienne, of course, so glad to have you back. We're just coming back off a refreshing break, and we're going to talk about what's going on here on campus in January. So let's jump right on into it. One thing that we wanted to start off at the top of the show, is as sort of a cheap plug, if you will, for the Nightly News, is we do have 2 home basketball games in the month of January. That will be on Wednesday, January 8th, so the day after this podcast is released, East Penn High School at 8:30, and then, of course, January 29th, that's senior night, and a special 8 o'clock tip-off. So definitely, if you're on campus or close to campus, come out to the game and support our Lady Knights. Unfortunately, the men don't have any home games here in January after the 4th, which that has already occurred when this is released. If you can't make it, please feel free to tune in to our YouTube channel. Tyler Coleman, Christian Fulp, and myself have been doing such a wonderful job, and we just absolutely love doing this, and it's a wonderful opportunity for, we actually have one of our new students who, Tyrene, who just arrived to campus and is already the producer of the show.
I am not surprised. He's great.
And he just does such a wonderful job. He jumped right into it, kind of was thrown into the fire here, and just absolutely loves it and done such a wonderful job. We're so glad to have him. And of course, Christian and Tyler are now going to be our new co-presidents.
Nice.
Brian Christiana does have one more term, but kind of wanted a term because Brian's been president for almost 2 years, and wanted to have a term that he can work with them and kind of get them, because both of them will be here through the end of the summer term. And then we'll have to go back to the drawing board. So they will actually be on the podcast next week talking about some of the things that they would like to do in their final year with the club. So even though Brian no longer president, he's still going to be around for this term. And then unfortunately, he's going to be moving on to bigger and better things. I know I'm very selfish, and I told him.
Unfortunately, fortunately. But
well, right.
we're excited for him, but we're always sad for us.
Yes, because we don't want them to leave. But yeah, so Lady Night Basketball, January 8th at 8:30, January 29th at 8 at East Penn High School. If you can make it there, of course, always free admission. And if you can't make it, or on demand on the Nightly News YouTube channel. starting off on a good note, 5-1 on the season so far, and it looks fairly good, like they're going to make the tournament. So we're looking forward to supporting them. Adrienne, before we get into Adrienne's featured 3 here, I wanted to talk about a couple of the things here on the calendar. And I noticed something on the calendar called Phonics Friday.
Yes.
Can you help us out with what this is?
So we all are familiar with, or maybe we're familiar with Word Wednesday, which was a series that has been around for a while here at Central Penn College, had several kinds of reinventions of itself. But we were doing Word Wednesday. Our counseling department had actually taken that over. And when we were looking at the coming year for 2020, that was something that is a really great opportunity for our counseling intern to lead. And they were not going to be available on the Wednesdays. So we did a little swippy swap, and can't call it Word Wednesday if it's
not on
not
Wednesday,
on Wednesday.
right?
So they came up with Phonics Friday, but it's going to be the same idea where we're going to have kind of this informal discussion, and a different word will be selected each week, and just informal discussion, eat lunch, enjoy some time to kind of think through whatever the word of the day is.
Can you give some examples of some of the previous words that have been used?
You know, there have been some really interesting ones. We've had some controversial ones in the past, maybe some profane words back in the day, but we've also kind of expanded it that they've included words like leadership, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones they had this past term, self-care, reflection. There were some really interesting ones that were, I think, unique to talk through.
And, one of the things that I enjoy about this is something that, maybe some of this is going on in the classroom, but for the most part, this is something that's kind of out of the ordinary in terms of what a student would typically get. And I think it's cool because sometimes, when you get into these conversations in the classroom, sometimes people are kind of afraid to talk about some of these things. But when you get in this atmosphere with Word Wednesday and now Phonics Friday, I think it's a lot easier for students to kind of open up and talk about some of these things that really maybe mean quite a lot to them, but never really have the opportunity to discuss. So I think that's very interesting, and I'm glad that the Counseling Center is continuing to keep this tradition alive. And of course, we will have Tom Palmieri on the show later in the term, so we look forward to having Tom on. One thing here, I see January 21st, Cooking with CPC. Do you have anything lined up for that at this point?
Oh, well, Mary Beth Fisher has been taking the lead with setting up those. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what they have planned in terms of menu, but I know that they've been very diverse in what they picked. We've had I think you were the one that led the grilling session, right?
Yes, and I actually really enjoyed that very much. What was the only thing that kind of took away from ours is that it was raining. And it rained, of course.
Of course, the day we're going to grill.
You can't grill indoors. I mean, I guess you could. You shouldn't. But we just had a tent, and we just made the best of it, and we kind of all huddled under the tent. And now it only rained for maybe the first 15 minutes, and then it cleared up. Mm-hmm. So we got lucky in terms of that. But yeah, I made steaks and chicken, and I made some different marinades, and I was, teaching them about marinating, and I was teaching them about how to, just simple stuff, but some stuff that's not done all that much. I mean, you should always be marinating your meat, always, constantly. I mean, but obviously that takes a little foresight, takes the right ingredients. So, I did that, and I was explaining about the process of marinating, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was a blast, and I'm really glad that I was able to do it. In fact, Leslie Heimbaugh, who wrote an article about that, we're actually going to be, for the first time, the Nightly News is going to be submitting, there's a local awards for student news organizations.
Oh.
And so we are going to submit a variety of articles from this year.
I love that. That's awesome.
And the article that Leslie wrote about my cooking with CPC is one of the ones that made the cut. So we're looking forward to that. We're hoping that some of these articles that have been written from some of our wonderful students are going to be selected, and then hopefully we can all go and maybe one of them will win.
So
that's
that
cool.
Would be great. Good luck with that.
So again, that's Cooking with CPC on January 21st at 4:30 in the NPR. We will make sure that we talk about this in much more detail on the blog. All right, so just a quick recap of some of the things we talked about so far, and then we'll go right to Adrienne's featured 3. Central Penn Lady Night Basketball, January 8th at 8:30, January 29th at 8 p.m. at East Penn High School, or on YouTube at the Nightly News at Central Penn College Facebook page. We have Phonics Friday. That'll be weeks 2, 3, and 4 in January. That's the 17th, 24th, and 31st at 12:30 in the cafe, run by the Counseling Center. And keep an eye out for Cooking with CPC on January 21st at 4:30 in the MPR. All right, Adrienne, that brings us to everyone's favorite segment, Adrienne's featured 3 events for the month of January. Let's get started with event number 1.
Well, I'm being sneaky already in the new year because I'm going to squeeze 2 events into my first one under the umbrella of Welcome Week. So we're week 1, back on campus. All of the new students are coming in. We're really excited to welcome them. And we do this traditional club fair on the first Wednesday of the term where all of our student clubs are represented, and our new students and our current students can learn about these amazing groups and all the cool stuff they're doing. One of the best things I think about being involved in a club is, yes, you're learning great things in the classroom, but often clubs give you the opportunity to really put those things into place. So here with the Nightly News, like, they could experience the podcast, they can write, they can have their articles submitted for possible awards. Like, there's so many extra experiences along with the leadership skills they're learning, the teamwork, all that good stuff. So definitely encouraging everybody to come out to the club fair. It's going to be Wednesday, January the 8th from 11 to 1. We're going to do the free pizza and hopefully have some music in the background and give everybody a chance to get to know these groups.
And club fair is so important for us. So just for example, I talked about Tyreen. We met Tyreen at the club fair, and one of our big selling points is, hey, we need a producer for our basketball games, and this is an opportunity for somebody who literally was on campus 2 days to be involved in something that directly impacts his future. I mean, even if he's interested in sports, this is a great resume builder. Just the ability to kind of network with the athletes and with the crew that we already have, and that's kind of what we're hoping for, because Tyler, Christian, we'll have them for baseball this year, but they're going to graduate by next fall, and we need somebody to kind of carry that torch.
Yep.
And that's kind of the biggest issue for myself with the athletics, is that unfortunately, or fortunately, as we mentioned earlier, our students are, because we're also an accelerated program, they are out of here a little sooner.
So fast.
I know.
They leave us so soon.
Like, I remember just like it was yesterday, Brian's first class, and he's getting ready to graduate. So club fair is a really, really, really important date for us, because that's the way that we can help build what we're doing here. And again, we need a commentator for baseball this year, because unfortunately, or fortunately, Christian is playing. So he can't commentate games while he's playing. So Tyler and I are going to take the lead, and Brian as well, while he's here. But we're going to need some help. So we hope we are meeting some wonderful new people at Club Fair.
And for somebody in the field that wants to be in this field, what great experience to be able to practice in a safe and supportive environment where they have you there to learn from, and to really first start dipping their toes in. To be able to do it here and not in the working world, it's huge.
And the feedback and support that we get from not only the college, but the athletes themselves, we are just blown away by the amount of views that we get. I mean, several hundred views for some of these basketball games. I mean, it's important to us, and it's important to the teams, because not all of their parents can be here.
Absolutely.
And for them to be able to watch, whether on their phone or certainly on their televisions, their kids play college sports, I'm sure it means a lot to those people. So Club Fair, Wednesday, January 8th at 11 to 1 in the ATEC lobbies.
Yep. And then I'm going to put in a plug for Friday morning. We're going to celebrate the fact that we are 1 week in the term, our end of week 1 pancake party, which actually is going to have Dr. Fedrizzi coming to join us. We're super excited about that. She helps with the pancakes, and it's just a great opportunity for her to not only meet our student body, but for the student body to be able to meet her. Not every college has a president that would be willing to sit there and flip pancakes and spend their morning getting to know the students. So I love that.
I think it's wonderful, and I think that Dr. Linda Fedrizzi Williams is a wonderful person for taking time out of her unbelievably hectic schedule
To make pancakes?
to make
Yes.
pancakes.
She's amazing.
And she's a wonderful cook as well. I love it. Last time pancakes were fantastic. So, all right, Adrienne, what is event number 2?
Event number 2 has 2 different dates, but it is auditions for our 2020 version of the Vagina Monologues. So this is something we've done in the past. I think last year we did a different incantation of it, but it's an amazing show, really designed to empower women and end violence against women and girls. And the show is just, it's awesome. It's really, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you're going to blush, all of those things in one amazing piece. And we need lots of students to be able to participate. Now, it is going to be open to students, faculty, staff, community is welcome to get involved as well. And it's going to raise money for the YWCA of Carlisle. So good cause, but you got to come out to auditions. The show is a staged reading. So if you're new to theater, I always encourage this one because it has lots of different levels of participation. There are smaller pieces, there are larger pieces, there are more risque pieces if you're looking to really challenge yourself in that way. But it's a stage reading, so there's none of the pressure of memorization. The rehearsal schedule, if you've been at other shows, sometimes a rehearsal schedule can be very intense, whereas this show, because it's designed as monologues, they're typically much easier to squeeze in rehearsal time, and you're not worrying about getting the entire group together until the very end. So very flexible in that way. And yeah, we want you all to come out and audition. You must be a self-identified female. Sorry, gentlemen, you are not invited to participate in this one, but any self-identified female is welcome to join us at auditions. There are 2 different chances to come out. The first is Tuesday, January 14th from 6 to 7:30, or Thursday, January 16th from 12:30 to 2. Either of those dates, we're going to be in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. And if you happen to have a date that doesn't work with you and you still are interested in participating, just reach out to me and we'll figure something out.
And that's Adrienne Thoman at centralpenn.edu if you need more information about the auditions or if you need to find an alternate time. Again, January 14th at 6 and January 16th at 12:30 in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater. Adrienne, what is the third and final event on Adrienne's Featured 3 for January?
I'm going to give a shout out to our CPC film series. We have Professor Jared Reif, who is going to do a presentation and screening around Black Klansman. This movie, have you seen it?
I have not, unfortunately. I don't get to see nearly as many movies as I like to. I did get to see Star Wars over break.
I haven't seen that.
So I did get to see that. My son is a huge, huge Star Wars fan. So every year we make it a habit to go to York because they have an IMAX theater, which I love the IMAX movies. And we always stop at Pamani Brothers for lunch.
Nice.
So we did that and we really, really enjoyed it. A lot of interesting discussion online about the quality of the movie. A lot of people not necessarily liking it, but we loved it. So
Well, that's all that matters.
Indeed. But yeah, I mean, Black Klansman definitely got a lot of press. Definitely in the running for one of the better movies of the year.
It's really good. And the book is, I read the book as well. And it's different than the movie. Obviously, the book was written almost like, because it was written by a police officer, was almost more of I pictured like a crime report kind of thing. Much more factual, this date, this time. And the movie was obviously dramatized for the sake of it being a movie, but both were really interesting. And I'm excited to see what Jared brings to the conversation about it.
And what's interesting is we've decided as a group, as a collective, which you're on the committee and I'm on the committee and Professor Reif, that we're trying to go into, I don't want to call it a different direction, but I will say that we are looking forward to having our first student presenter this year. We mentioned Leslie Heimbaugh earlier. Leslie, she is an evening student, evening and online, so she's not necessarily here during the day because she does have a day job. She works for the Perry County Literacy Council. She has covered the CPC film series ever since she's basically stepped on campus and does just a wonderful job. I mean, she's just fantastic. She had made a comment to me earlier in 19 asking me if there would ever be an opportunity for a student to present. And then I brought this up at our last committee meeting, and it was met with open arms. So she has not necessarily decided on what she's going to present at this point. I asked her to think about it over break. but we're looking forward to her presenting in October, I believe. So definitely looking forward to that. These CPC film series are wonderful. We've had anywhere from 30 to 50 people in the Capitol Blue Cross Theater, and I think it's fun because it's free. We offer free popcorn. We are going to try to get more clubs involved with this year as a way for our students to be a little bit more involved with it as well. But I just really, really hope that the campus community continues to support the CPC film series coming up on January 24th with Black Klansman with Professor Jared Reif. All right, quick rundown of Adrienne's featured 3. We're going to start off with Welcome Week Club Fair, January 8th, Wednesday from 11 to 1 in the ATEC lobbies. Also, Pancakes with the President on Friday, January 10th from 9 to 11 a.m. Also have the Vagina Monologue auditions, January 14 and 16. January 14 is from 6 to 7:30. January 16 from 12:30 to 2. And last but not least, the CPC film series with Black Klansman. That'll be Friday, January 24th at 6:30 with Professor Reif. Adrienne, I think that about does it.
I think that wraps it up. Lots of good stuff happening.
And of course, when the official calendar is released, definitely pick up a copy. So much going on in January. Adrienne, thank you so very much for joining us here. And frankly, where would our students be without you?
Where would I be without them? That's the question.
Yes, you do have a very good point. But we certainly appreciate all of your hard work. And again, make sure you check out the Pirate Life podcast, everybody. Adrienne and the gang do such a wonderful job. And I actually had my first cameo today.
We were really excited. Producer Paul finally got to have a comment on the podcast.
Well, it's your podcast. I have my own podcast. I can talk, till I'm blue in the face on mine, but it's yours.
I know, but we appreciate your willingness to get up at 6:30 in the morning to help us.
Well, I got up at 5:15 today.
Well,
no, of course. I really enjoy doing it. I really do. All 3 of you are just wonderful people, and you're always in such a wonderful mood. So I appreciate being a part of it. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For the Director of Student Engagement, Adrienne Thoman, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we will catch you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.